Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia, and today we're continuing our Fall of the Han lore series with episode 10 titled The Han Strikes Back. So in our last two episodes, we look at the rebellion from the Yellow Turban's perspective, and now after a string of early successes, it's time to look at the Han response. Now we mentioned already in our last episode that with the commanderies like Nanyang, Yinchuan, and Runan falling one after another, the emperor was getting nervous inside his West Palace. So he did the unthinkable as he emptied his pockets and used his personal wealth and horses to help arm a new army. At the same time, the 5,000 elite imperial army was handed to He Jin, who was the emperor's brother-in-law, as he was now responsible for the defense of the capital, as 8 gate passes surrounding the capital were manned in preparation for the advancing Yellow Turban forces from the south and east. Generals Zhu Jun and Huang Fusong were given control of a total of 40,000 newly recruited men and ordered south to counterattack against the rebel forces. Zhu Jun headed straight for Yinchuan to the east to face off against Bo Cai with 20,000 men, and were shockingly defeated in their first encounter as he found himself overwhelmed by the number of Yellow Turban forces, and found himself now surrounded by an encampment by Bo Cai. Huang Fusong, who had originally been aiming to head towards Nanyang to relieve the pressure there by Zhang Mancheng, was now forced to change course to rescue Zhu Jun's army. When Huang Fusong arrived on the scene, his men were shocked by how many Yellow Turbans there were, and thought about retreating. But Huang Fusong rallied his men as he noted that Bo Cai's forces were largely inexperienced and had built their encampment with rudimentary dried straw huts instead of the standard wooden structures. So Huang Fusong picked a dry, windy winter night to use a fire attack to light Bo Cai's encampment ablaze as reinforcements from the imperial cavalry led by Cao Cao arrived from the capital to help. And their combined forces of Huang Fusong, Cao Cao, and the besieged Zhu Jun from inside the encampment slaughtered Bo Cai's forces, killing over 10,000 Yellow Turbans that night. After this win, Yinchuan was largely secured, as Cao Cao returned back to the capital with the imperial cavalry forces, while Zhu Jun and Huang Fusong headed farther south together this time, to first meet up with Liu Chong's forces in Chen to clear up the Yellow Turban forces there, before headed farther south to crush Peng Tuo in Runan. At this point, the only threats around the capital was in Nanyang, where Zhang Mancheng was in firm control, and some sieges around Dong to the east. So Zhu Jun and Huang Fusong decided to split up here, as Zhu Jun went to Nanyang and Huang Fusong went to Dong. While Dong was an easy fight as the administrator and local forces still held the capital, Nanyang proved to be much more difficult, as from the onset of the rebellion, Zhang Mancheng was able to take control of the city of Wancheng and killed off Chu Gong, who was the local administrator. And although the newly appointed administrator of Qinjie, who hailed from Jiangxia, had arrived with a new force and was able to put Wancheng under siege and even kill Zhang Mancheng in the battle, the city of Wancheng was still firmly in Yellow Turban hands, as they promoted a new leader within their rank called Zhao Hong, and Zhao Hong remained inside the city, holding it against Qinjie's siege. And for the next 2 months, Zhao Hong and his over 100,000 Yellow Turban believers, which includes women and children, held the city of Wancheng until Zhu Jun's forces arrived in August to help with the siege. And with their combined forces, Zhao Hong was slain in the next attack. But even with Zhao Hong dead, much like the case with Zhang Mancheng's death, the Yellow Turban simply promoted a new general named Han Zhong and held on for another 3 months until they were eventually defeated and all killed by November of 184, thus ending all Yellow Turban Rebellion forces south of the capital. Now let's rewind a little bit to go back to the beginning of the rebellion, as there was also a northern armed forces led by Lu Zhi that left the capital at the same time as Zhu Jun and Huang Fusong went south. Now this force sailed across the Yellow River and went deep into the Yellow Turban heartland to face off against Zhang Jiao. After crossing the Yellow River, Lu Zhi's forces won victory after victory, and not only was Lu Zhi winning, he was also pincering Zhang Jiao's position to force him away from the stronghold of Ye and forcing him eastward as Zhang Jiao's forces was forced to retreat to a small city of Guangzhong just south of the Lujun commandery. Now, having the small city surrounded, Lu Zhi made preparations for a final assault as he dug trenches to surround the city, sapped the city walls, and built siege weapons. But in June, a eunuch named Zuo Feng arrived from the capital to inspect the progress of the army and secretly demanded bribes from Lu Zhi. Now, Lu Zhi, who is a well-known scholar and a very straightforward, honorable man, simply ignored this request and sent him back. So when Zuo Feng returned to the capital, he reported to Liu Hong that Lu Zhi was overly passive and had no interest to attack, and perhaps didn't even want to see an end to the rebellion. This report obviously enraged Liu Hong, as he ordered Lu Zhi to be sent back to the capital and imprisoned for life without parole. And in his place, Dong Zhuo was sent to take over command of the northern forces. However, shockingly, Dong Zhuo's assault on Guangzhong failed spectacularly as Zhang Jiao's forces held and finally found some breathing room. Then, Dong Zhuo, hoping to save face by scoring a simple victory, decided to abandon the siege entirely as he marched the men farther north to fight against a weaker Zhang Bao force in Quyang. But his attack here also stalled as he couldn't find any openings after a 2-month-long fight, and the imperial court was forced once again to switch commanders. So in August of 184, as Huang Fusong had wrapped up in Dong to the east, he was thrusted to replace Dong Zhuo in the north, and Dong Zhuo was sent back to the capital, stripped of his command and awaiting punishment. Once Huang Fusong took command of the northern forces, he resumed Lu Zhi's strategy of sieging Guangzhong, and to his luck, Zhang Jiao dies of sickness while under the siege. Yet, despite Zhang Jiao's death, Huang Fusong was not able to take Guangzhong right away, as Zhang Jiao's brother Zhang Liang took control and held the city. So Huang Fusong decided to use a little strategy as he pulled out the siege and feigned a retreat. This lured Zhang Liang into a false sense of security and confidence as he ordered his 30,000 elite fighting force to give chase after Huang Fusong, hoping to crush the government forces once and for all, only to fall into Huang Fusong's trap, as the retreat's only purpose was to pull Zhang Liang's forces out of the city. Out on the open field, Huang Fusong's forces eliminated Zhang Liang's forces, even killing Zhang Liang in the battle. And with the fighting forces depleted outside of the city, the remaining 50,000 followers inside the city that made up largely of elders, women, and children committed mass suicide as they threw themselves into the river. And with this victory, Huang Fusong finally took control of Guangzhong as Zhang Jiao's grave was dug up to cut off his head. Then Zhang Jiao and Zhang Liang's heads were both sent back to the capital to report the victory. Now, all that remained of the 3 Zhang brothers is now Zhang Bao, who had a force of over 100,000 men in total, that includes women, children, and elders, farther up north. And isolated and demoralized, Zhang Bao's forces didn't put up much of a fight, as Huang Fusong was able to eradicate them. None of the Yellow Turban believers were spared, as all 100,000 of them were slaughtered. And to commemorate this victory, Huang Fusong built what's called a Jingguan, which is a mountain of bones and skulls to showcase the might of the Han Empire and to warn those who might think about rebelling again. And with that, the Yellow Turban Rebellion that started in late February was finally over by November of the same year, as government forces eliminated the 3 Zhang brothers. And even though regional forces like Zhang Yan in the Black Mountains were still alive, they toned down their activities to not attract the full government attention, as they awaited for a more opportune moment to resurface. Of all the generals that participated in putting down the rebellion, Huang Fusong was awarded the most, as he was now appointed to be the governor of the Ji province, which is the province where the Zhang brothers hailed from, to help the government to continue monitor the situation there. And Huang Fusong would prove to be a wise governor too, as he asked the government to exempt all citizens of the Ji province from their taxes for 1 year, to help soothe public opinion and help the region recover from the 9-month-long warfare that tore through their land. Additionally, Huang Fusong pleaded the government to pardon Lu Zhi, and the emperor, who was delighted that the rebellion was over so quickly, agreed, as Lu Zhi was released and given a court position inside the capital. Zhu Jun, who had finished the rebellion in Nanyang, was also summoned back to the court and given a minister position to award him for his role in putting down the rebellion. And even Dong Zhuo was pardoned in December, as the emperor was in a good mood all around. Yet, this good mood was short-lived, as news of a new rebellion out west reached the capital that winter, as the western stronghold commander of Jincheng fell to the Qiang rebels. What was more disturbing about the details of this news was the fact that this rebellion out west was not just a Qiang-led effort as in the past, but also included a coup within the Han forces that seemed to have opened the gates of Jincheng to join forces with the Qiang rebels as they welcomed them inside the commandery. Now, news slowly filtered into the capital that winter, and situation out west grew dimmer and dimmer. A week after the news of losing Jincheng, more news broke out that Leng Zheng, who was the Qiang lieutenant, or the highest commanding officer in the Liang province at the time, was also killed by his own men, as they decided to also join up with the rebels. Now, knowing that the government forces within the Liang province now seems no longer able to defend the province by themselves, the government once again scrambles to recruit new armies and shift forces out west, as this rebellion of Qiang nomadic tribes and defected Han forces will prove much more difficult to put down when compared to the Yellow Turbans. So come back next time, as we will once again return to the Liang province to find out why they rebelled in the first place, and more importantly, to find out why the Han forces decided to defect and join them. So see you all next time. Bye.